Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Property Pilot. So today we're going to be talking about whether to buy property in your personal or limited company. Okay, so today we're talking about whether to buy property in a limited company or your personal name. And this is a really popular topic at the moment for several reasons that I'll cover very briefly before we get into the pros and cons of each. And as you may have already researched online, Section 24, which came into effect several years ago and has slowly been rolling in, which basically means for those that own property in their personal name, they can't claim those finance costs, those interest costs. They're not tax deductible, which puts a real squeeze on profits at the end of the day. This is a massive driver in which has kick-started landlords to actually transitioning property from personal to a limited company ownership. Now, there are other things as well behind the scenes that have been going on that's, again, prompted these kind of discussions, and we'll come on to that shortly. But this is a question I get asked all the time. I'd say every month at least 2 or 3 people will ask me, well, should I transfer my properties into a limited company? Or, should I actually, I really want to get into property. How's the best way to structure it? Now, everyone's circumstances are completely different. And this is why it's really important to speak to an accountant or a tax specialist. There's only so much advice and opinion I can offer, but I'm not an accountant, I'm not a tax specialist. This is just my opinion. If you want to be put in touch with an accountant or a tax specialist, I'm more than happy to do so. You can work with the people that I work with, I know, I trust, I like them. If you go to the description, follow the link to my website and I can put you in touch with them. So let's get into it. Limited company to begin with. One of the main pros of a limited company is that you pay less tax. So what do I mean here? As it stands at the moment, you pay 19% corporation tax. So that's 19% on any profits you make in a limited company, which is great. And what we're going to do is we're going to contrast this tax with what you would pay if you have properties in your personal name. And this really depends on a few things. It depends on where you are and what level of tax you actually pay. So typically, if you're a higher rate taxpayer, you will pay 40%. And 40% is much higher than 19%. If you're on the lower end of the tax bracket, then actually it may not be to your advantage actually putting property in a limited company, and we'll come on to that very, very shortly. So limited company, you typically pay less tax. Another massive important point is within a limited company, you can deduct all those finance costs. So the interest you're paying, you can completely deduct those as costs, which will increase your net profit. You're increasing your costs, which you can claim, which is great. Whereas in your personal name, you can't claim interest costs. You can't do that. That's what Section 24 is. And because of that, profitability in a personal name is really squeezed and it's quite difficult. Another third benefit of having property in your limited company is that it's very easy to add and remove directors. So, if you're thinking about legacy, about passing on your property portfolio to your children, well, it's far simpler to do in a limited company by adding them as directors than it is to go through changing personal ownerships of property. That can get really expensive and time consuming. So to recap, 3 advantages of having properties in a limited company. First of all, you typically pay less tax. We'll come onto this shortly. Second of all, the finance interest costs are deductible. And third of all, it's very easy to add and remove directors, which means when you're changing your company and adding your family or partners into it, it's far, far easier. Okay, so let's come on to the disadvantages of owning property in a limited company. And to be honest, there aren't many. So first of all, you're going to have to pay more for an accountant. And the reason why this is it takes longer to actually prepare and file and submit company tax returns than it would do for property in a personal name. So that bill you're going to get at the end of the year from your accountant is going to be slightly higher. However, I wouldn't be put off by this. I'd much rather pay my accountant extra money or thousands of pounds for them to be able to save me tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds. Almost see it as an investment in itself. So beyond the additional accounting costs you've got in a limited company, there are other costs as well. So a limited company has limited liability. And when it comes to property, this actually, let me backtrack slightly. Normally this is a massive plus, having limited liability in a limited company structure. However, when it comes to property, and especially when it comes to leveraging a property and borrowing from property, lenders will most of the time require that you personally guarantee that loan. And what that actually means is, even though the property is owned in your limited company, if something goes wrong and the limited company is unable to pay for the loan outstanding on that property, the lender can come to you personally and get that money from you personally because you've signed this personal guarantee. So actually, the limited liability that a limited company it comes with isn't that advantageous when it comes to property investing and leveraging in property investing. And this leads on to other costs as well. So that personal guarantee you've got to sign, well, that costs you money. You're going to have to seek what's called ILA, independent legal advice, where you go to a solicitor. The solicitor will make you fully aware of what you're signing. You sign the document and they'll charge a fee for that. Now, I've seen some solicitors charge an arm and a leg for independent legal advice, especially for portfolio landlords who know the game and it's just another part of the process. So if you're putting volume through your solicitor, I'd seriously suggest negotiating a fixed rate, a discounted rate on ILAs, so you're not paying market rate every single time you mortgage a property. Okay, so now we're going to come to owning property in your personal name. Now, we've already mentioned a few pros and cons about having property in your personal name just by the default of talking about the limited company and the pros and cons there. But here are a couple of things that I haven't mentioned that are really important to know. So a big plus of owning property in your personal name is that the mortgage rate you're paying will be less. So if you've got a mortgage on the property, that rate will be less than the limited company rate, which means every single month that money you're paying to the mortgage company is less, which is great. But hold on a second. It's great in the short term, but in the long term, or even not the long term, in an annual basis, actually this isn't so great. And for the reasons we've already spoken about. So of course, Section 24, if we have companies in a personal name, we can't claim those interest costs, which again, actually most of the time outweighs the benefits of that initial rate you're getting, that great rate in your personal name being less. So again, the negatives of having property in your personal name is, it's normally not very tax efficient if you have several properties, if you're a higher rate taxpayer and you actually want to grow your portfolio even further. So just to recap, if you're serious about property and it's your long-term play, also you're a higher rate taxpayer and you have 3 or 4 properties currently now, well, really you should be investing in a limited company. Now, again, speak to an accountant, speak to a tax specialist. I'm by no means an expert in this field. This is my opinion and this is the information I've gathered through speaking to my accountant over the years. But really, if that's who you are, normally a limited company is for you. However, let's look at the other area. Maybe you've got one property, you're an accidental landlord, you've inherited a property. Maybe you're not a higher rate taxpayer and actually property for you isn't an important part of your life. Yeah, maybe you may look at it again in the future, but you've got no desire to build a huge portfolio. Well, actually, owning property in your personal name may be best to you. Again, speak to an accountant or a tax specialist. Now, one thing we haven't spoken about yet, which I will make another video about, is actually transferring property from your personal name to a limited company. Again, it's really popular at the moment, but be careful before you do so because there are costs to pay and these costs can be huge. So you're going to have to pay any capital gains tax on that transfer. You're also going to have to pay stamp duty as well. So it's important that you speak to a tax specialist when you're considering doing this because they can actually understand what it's going to cost you to transfer from personal to limited company and they can advise on what they recommend, and then it's up to you to pull the trigger and decide if that's what's best for you and for your future. So I hope you've really got value from this video today about whether to have property in your personal or limited company. If you haven't already subscribed, what the hell are you doing? Subscribe to the channel. There's really good content coming shortly. And if any of you have any comments to make, you know where it is, put it in the comment box. If you're looking to be put in touch with an accountant or a tax specialist that I use, again, head to the description. There's a link to my website and I'll put you in touch with my team and the people that I know, like, and trust. Thank you very much for watching.